you'll have to enter that in. I'll show you at the end how to do that. This little thing here, card game app delegate.h&m. We'll talk about that briefly, especially when we start talking about things like multitasking. But I like to just move those out of the way. So I often put them down here in this supporting files folder. And you can just pick up any file, by the way, and move them anywhere you want here to kind of clean up your view. So here I've got my view and my controller only showing here, okay? So let's go straight to the view and see what that looks like. So here's my view. It's a blank iPhone 5 sized, right? A tall and thin view, and it's blank. There's nothing in it. It's white. This area on the left, by the way, where we clicked on these files, that's called the navigator. And you can not only navigate all your files here, but you can navigate your breakpoints and build problems and your class hierarchies, all that stuff up here. So again, most of you know Xcode, so you probably know most of this stuff. We'll be demoing all this as the quarter goes on. And this area over here is called the utilities area. And this is where you basically find out detail about what's going on here. So inspectors for attributes and dimensions and connections and things like that go here. And this is also where you can drag out the things that you're going to use to build your user interface. Because we're going to build our view entirely graphically. Okay? We're not going to write code for the most part to build our view. As the quarter goes on, we'll learn a little more about how to build our view in code, but we're going to start out just purely doing our view by graphically dragging things out and wiring them up, and we're going to put our code in our controller. This two sides can be hidden and shown with these two buttons. See, you can hide those to make those right. This might appear also, this area right here, this little button down here. This is called the document outline. This is really handy dandy, but again, we're not going to talk about that today. We can only talk about so much at once. The document outline basically shows you all of the instances of objects in your view in a kind of an outline form. So you can really easily find them and their relationships to each other. The other thing you can do is if you, I don't want this iPhone 5 sized thing because my screen is low resolution here, so it works on the projector. So I'm going to click this little button down here, which reduces me down to iPhone 4 size, okay, or iPhone 4S, non-tall and thin. But you can click back and forth and move them back and forth. But I'm just trying to make everything fit on screen here. OK, so let's just dive right into building our view here. What our view is going to be today is a single card with an ace of clubs written on it. OK, that's going to be it. And I'm going to be able to click on the card, and it'll flip over and show the back of the card, and then click on it again and flip back and show me the ace of clubs again, back and forth, okay? And your homework is going to be to make it so when the card flips up, it doesn't show the ace of club, it shows a random card drawn from the deck. Okay? That's going to be your entire homework that's due on Monday. Okay, so let's do this. Really simple. We go to this area right here, this object library. Okay, that's the third button over here, show object library. And this is where all our objects are. If you look in here and you don't see these objects, it might be worth clicking on your view. Sometimes Xcode wants to know what the destination is that you're going to be dragging things into. So if you click on it, then you'll see these things. And we're just going to grab one of these buttons right here. So I'm just going to pick this button up and drag it out. And notice as I drag it out, these little blue lines appear, these guidelines. Okay, these guidelines are super important. They seem just like, oh, a convenience for helping you put it right in the middle or right in the right-hand corner. And they are, but they're really important for making sure that all the things in your view are kind of like standard space apart, right, and lined up against edges, so that as the users go from one app to another, things will all be separated by predictable spaces and everything will be consistent. It's really important. And there's a mechanism, you can see this switch right here, Use Auto Layout, which is introduced in iOS 6 and vastly improved in iOS 7, especially in Xcode, that allows when your user interface changes size, like it goes from being an iPhone 4 to an iPhone 5, or it rotates from being vertical to being horizontal, or it's on an iPad in a bigger space, for all the buttons and everything to kind of move to a new position that makes sense, or at least most of them, right? And then maybe you might have to move a few of them by hand, depending on what's going on, but it mostly automatically lays it out. And this is really important because I'm sure devices will continue to be differing sizes as new devices come out over the years. So doing auto layout is important, and these blue guidelines are the #1 most important thing for auto layout. We're going to cover auto layout in detail, and there's a lot to it. All these buttons down here have to do with auto layout, but getting those blue guidelines, making sure you drop things with at least one blue guideline somewhere is really important to kind of get you going down the right path with a properly auto laid out UI. So we have this button here, but before, and of course we can go over here to this is the attributes inspector and click on it, and we'll see all kinds of attributes. In fact, if I hide this, tons and tons of attributes for this button. Okay, not just the button itself, but actually its superclass has attributes. Control is its superclass, and then view is control superclass, and it has attributes. Okay, so this is an object-oriented inspector that will show all the attributes of all the things through the inheritance hierarchy. And what's happening here is we're actually editing an instance of the button here. So we are not, and I know in some systems you lay out the button, you set the size, and you set the attributes, and then behind the scenes a bunch of code is being generated to create the button. That's not what we're doing here. We're actually editing live objects. They're essentially going to be freeze-dried, and then when your app runs, add water, they come to life, okay, with all their attributes set and all their sizes and positions and all their auto layout information in the object, okay? So it's a little different than you might be used to in some other systems. So anyway, before we edit the attributes of this button, though, let's change our background, because this is a card game, and most card games are on like green felt, right? So let's make our background be more like a green felt. So I'm just going to click on the background, which is this view right here, and you can see its properties. So I'm going to change a couple, or just one of its properties, which is the background. You see this background white color right here? So if I click on this, I have some recently used colors. I have all these kind of black and white colors, and I also have other. And if I bring up other, it brings up the crayons, okay? It also brings up other ways to choose colors, but I like the crayons, okay? And so, where are my crayons? There they are. So let's pick a green, like moss is a good green, clover. I kind of like moss better. So that's kind of a card game background. And that's it. So we've set the background color of our views, okay? And all the attribute setting is just like this. You just set it and, set it and forget it. So let's go back to the button and its properties. Okay, the button I want to look like a card. Well, a button in iOS 7 basically looks a lot like a hyperlink on a web page, just like that button does right there, okay? That blue button. That's not really appropriate for what we want. We want it to look like a card with a little rounded rect and a white background, right? And then we want the back of the card to look the same but have some kind of design on it or something like that. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to set a background image for my button. Okay, a background image is like a rounded rect. So let's take a little aside here and talk about how do we get images into our app. Okay, we want to use images in our app. It's very common to want to use images in a graphical application like on a phone. So how do you do it? And the answer is you go down here to this place called the image asset library, images.xc assets, that's Xcode assets. And you can see there's already a couple of slots for icons here. They're not set. But this is the app icon, and also you can have a launch image that will appear instantly when someone launches your app, and then as you're initializing, happening behind the launch image, and then it'll show your actual UI. So it's kind of quick launch image. And we'll talk about this on Monday. We'll set the app icon for Machismo here. But I'm going to actually drag in some other image. So I have some images here. And for example, I've got this Stanford logo right here. So I'm going to drag that Stanford logo in, because I want to use it, and that's it. You just drag it in here. It says Stanford. But notice that it kind of has this weird thing here, this 1x and 2x. You see that? And that's because every image that you're going to use on the, in iOS wants to have a normal resolution version that's going to be used like on the iPhone 4, non-retina displays basically, and then a 2x, twice as high resolution one that will be used on retina. And it'll automatically pick the right one depending on what you're running on. Okay? You don't have to do anything about it, but you do want to provide these higher res ones, and these higher res ones aren't just necessarily the same exact image, just made more high resolution. They might allow you to do, for example, here I got a Stanford logo with the little tree. See the tree in there? So maybe this is too low resolution to really get a good looking tree, but I can get the tree in at a higher resolution, so I put it in there. So it's not that common that the two ones would be actually different looking, but they could be. It's certainly allowed they could be. I also don't want to really call this Stanford. I'm going to use this as my back of card. Instead of having, some kind of design, I'm going to have the Stanford logo be the back of my card. When my card's flip down, I see the back, I'm going to see a Stanford logo. So I'm going to call this card back. Okay, because I can call it anything I want. I also have things for the front here. This one right here. This is blank card with a rounded corner. There it is. Can you? Oh, you can't see. It's white because it's a white card, so you can't see it. But I'm going to use that. I'm going to call this one card front, and I also have a high-res version of that as well. Okay, so looks good. So as much as we can see of it. Okay, so now I got some images, and now I want to use them in my view. I want to set this card to use them. So I'm going to start with my card here being face up when it runs. When my app runs, the card is going to start face up. In your app, when you get your homework, you're probably going to want to start it face down. The reason for that is my app only shows one card, ace of clubs. So it's fine if it comes up with ace of clubs. But you don't want your card to come up ace of clubs for sure. And it might be a little more work for you coding-wise to initialize it to come up with some random card. So just have it come up face down. Make it a lot easier on you. Okay? So how do we set that? Really simple. I've got the button selected here. Here's its properties. One of its properties is its background image. Okay? So I'm just going to click here, and you can see that all images that are in my assets library would be here. Okay? And if there was a really lot of them, you can type and it'll match it. So I'm going to make it be the card front. So it made it the card front, but I don't see where's the rounded rect? Okay? I can't see the rounded rect. And that's because it's too small to see the rounded corners very well here. So you can just take this thing and resize it. Okay, and I'm going to make it, I want it to be about a 2 to 3 aspect ratio, so I'm going to make it 64 by 96. I know this happens to be a very good size. And I've resized it. Now you can see the little rounded corners, you see? So this is that image I dragged in with button written on top of it. And of course, I moved it a little so I can put it back in the middle using my blue guidelines, right? And of course, I don't want my card to say button on it. I want the ace of clubs on here. So I'm going to just double click on it. I could also edit that up here. You see right here where it says button? I could click it here. But I'm just going to double click directly on it. I'm going to type ace. And how do I type clubs? Anyone know? Alt something or other. I like to do it this way. I go to the edit menu, special characters. You get this magic thing. You ever seen this? Kind of cool. And just double click. Find the clubs and double click. All right, so there's my ace of clubs. Yeah, but you know, that's not quite right either. I don't really like that blue A. I really want the A to be black. And it could be a little bigger. There's more room for it. So I can go over here, for example, and change the font. I can change it by clicking this little thing to make it bigger. Or I can actually click on this T and even set which font it is. One thing that's really important in iOS 7 is the typography. Okay? Picking the right text styles is really, really important in iOS 7. And we're not going to really talk about it here. We're just going to use the system font. But that's something we'll talk about in lecture, is making sure you pick the right font in the right places to make the UI look really nice. I can change the size here, maybe 24 point or something like that. That'll still fit. And then I don't want this blue, so that's this text color. So let's go ahead and make that black. All right, so I got the card looking the way I want. That's good. All these properties that we're setting, by the way, if you look at button, you see this state config right here, default. We can actually set all these things differently for the highlighted state of the button or a selected